December 8, 1941. Bataan Peninsula, Philippines. Lieutenant Colonel Philip Fry watched through his field glasses as Japanese infantry formations advanced across the clearing toward his position. Behind him, the 3rd Battalion of the 57th Philippine Scouts Regiment settled into firing positions, their weapons unfamiliar to most soldiers in any army on Earth. The attackers expected bolt-action resistance, 5 aimed shots before each defender paused to work their rifle's mechanism. They had faced Chinese troops for years with that exact calculus. The first American rifle fired. Then another. Then the entire line erupted. Not in the measured cadence of bolt-action combat, but in a continuous roar that sounded like nothing the Japanese had encountered. 40 rounds per minute poured from each position. The advancing formation staggered, then broke. When the smoke cleared, Fry would struggle to find words. "It was a slaughter," he reported to headquarters. "The firepower of a battalion armed with modern weapons is something. The Garand rifle is beyond my descriptive powers." The weapon that shattered Japanese expectations on that January morning in 1942 had been born from one man's quiet obsession with impossible problems. John Garand arrived at Springfield Armory in Massachusetts in 1919, a French-Canadian machinist whose accent never quite faded from his English. The armory still smelled of cosmoline and gunpowder from the Great War, where its production failures had become legendary in military circles. During that conflict, Springfield had managed to produce just 265,000 rifles while the Army desperately needed millions. Rock Island Arsenal had been forced to supplement their output, but even combined, American production had fallen catastrophically short. Garand walked through workshops filled with craftsmen hand-fitting parts to century-old bolt-action designs. Each M1903 Springfield rifle required skilled armorers working at artisan pace, methods utterly unsuited for modern warfare's industrial hunger. The British had learned this lesson in their factories, designing the M1917 Enfield to be manufactured by machines and unskilled workers. Garand studied these lessons and reached a conclusion that would define his next 15 years. America needed to abandon the M1903 entirely. The challenge consumed him. Army ordnance demanded a rifle suitable for infantrymen, cavalry, and tank crews alike. It had to use parts from the existing M1903 where possible. Most critically, General Douglas MacArthur, then Army Chief of Staff, insisted it fire the standard .30-06 cartridge, since millions of rounds sat in warehouses across the country. Congressional budget cuts made developing new ammunition politically impossible. Garand accepted these constraints and began sketching designs in his experimental shop, often working long past official hours, his desk lamp the only light in the darkened building. By 1926, he had created something radical. A gas-operated, semi-automatic rifle that captured expanding gases from fired cartridges to automatically chamber the next round. The mechanism eliminated the manual bolt action entirely. Early prototypes used a gas trap system that proved problematic, trapping fouling and requiring frequent maintenance. Garand refined the design, eventually developing a gas port system drilled directly into the barrel. Simpler, more reliable, requiring no external mechanisms prone to damage. The rifle fed from an 8-round N-block clip inserted through the top of the receiver. When the final round fired, the empty clip ejected automatically with a distinctive metallic ping, and the bolt locked open, ready for immediate reloading. The system allowed trained soldiers to maintain continuous fire at rates previously impossible with bolt-action weapons. Where a skilled rifleman with an M1903 Springfield might achieve 15 rounds per minute after working the bolt between each shot, the same soldier with Garand's design could sustain 40 to 50 rounds per minute, simply pulling the trigger as fast as accuracy allowed. Testing dragged through the late 1920s and early 1930s. Budget constraints slowed every phase. Ordnance committees debated calibers, with some advocating for the lighter .276 round. Garand developed versions in both calibers, conducting trials that showed promise. But on February 25, 1932, Adjutant General John B. Schuman delivered MacArthur's decision. All work on .276 caliber would cease immediately. Every resource would focus on perfecting the .30-06 version. On August 3, 1933, the rifle was officially designated semi-automatic rifle, caliber .30 M1. Production moved at glacial pace. The first test batch of 75 rifles went to field trials in May 1934, split between infantry and cavalry units. Problems emerged immediately: feeding issues, ejection failures, parts breaking under sustained fire. Garand returned to his workshop, modifying, testing, modifying again. The rifle wasn't standardized until January 9, 1936, and the first production model wasn't successfully tested until July 21, 1937. Even then, manufacturing difficulties limited Springfield Armory to producing just 100 rifles per day. The weapon that emerged weighed 9.5 pounds, substantially heavier than the M1903 it replaced. The walnut stock concealed the gas-operated mechanism beneath a thick fir end, making it bulkier and less elegant than traditional military rifles. Accuracy was slightly inferior to the handcrafted M1903, but only marginally so, maintaining effectiveness out to 500 yards. The trade-off seemed worth it: 3 times the rate of fire, greater ruggedness, suitability for mass production, and significantly easier training for new recruits who didn't need to master the timing and manual dexterity required for bolt operation. Many veteran soldiers, particularly older NCOs, resented the new rifle initially. They had spent careers mastering marksmanship with bolt actions, winning unit competitions through careful trigger squeeze and precise aim. The M1 seemed to privilege volume of fire over accuracy, a philosophy that offended their professional pride. Some men in the Philippines before the war even purchased or traded for old M1903s, preferring familiar weapons to Garand's innovation. By January 1941, production had finally accelerated to 600 rifles per day. The U.S. Army became fully equipped with the M1 by year's end. The Marine Corps, more conservative in adoption, continued using M1903 Springfields through the first years of the war, not completing their transition until 1943. As American soldiers deployed to the Philippines between August and November 1941, many carried M1 Garands among the mixed arsenal that included M1903s, M1917 Enfields, and Thompson submachine guns, all fortunately chambered in .30-06, simplifying a logistical nightmare in that distant corner of the Pacific. Meanwhile, across the ocean, Imperial Japanese forces prepared for their southern offensive armed with weapons that reflected entirely different military philosophy. The Arisaka Type 38 and Type 99 bolt-action rifles equipped nearly every Japanese soldier. Reliable, accurate, with exceptionally strong receivers, these rifles embodied traditional infantry doctrine: disciplined, aimed fire, close-quarters bayonet combat, tactics proven through decades of success against Chinese forces. Japanese war planners had considered developing semi-automatic weapons in the 1930s, even testing designs based on the Czechoslovakian ZH-29. They chose instead to invest in proven bolt-action technology and the more powerful 7.7mm cartridge for their Type 99 variant. No one in Tokyo imagined their soldiers would soon face a rifle that fundamentally altered the mathematics of infantry combat. The first American M1 Garands arrived in the Philippines with reinforcement shipments during the final months of 1941. They equipped regular Army units: the 31st Infantry Regiment, the Philippine Scouts 45th and 57th Infantry Regiments, and the 26th Cavalry Regiment. General MacArthur requested 84,000 additional M1s to fully equip his command, but production constraints made that number pure fantasy. Most Filipino and American soldiers still carried M1903 Springfields or even older M1917 Enfields. The Garand remained a relative novelty, issued primarily to regular Army formations. December 7, 1941, December 8 on the western side of the international date line, shattered any remaining peacetime illusions. Japanese aircraft appeared over Philippine airfields in coordinated strikes, catching American planes on the ground despite hours of advance warning from Pearl Harbor. Hangars exploded. Runways cratered. Naval installations burned. The air campaign lasted mere hours, but it eliminated American air power as a strategic factor. Japanese ground forces landed at multiple points across Luzon on December 10. The invasion unfolded with the precision of long planning, experienced formations that had honed their tactics through years of combat in China. They expected resistance to follow familiar patterns, defensive positions held by soldiers armed with bolt-action rifles, requiring manual operation between each shot. Their own doctrine centered on aggressive infantry tactics, suppressing enemy positions with machine gun fire and light artillery, then closing for bayonet charges where Japanese martial training would prove decisive. The first ground engagements in mid-December involved scattered defensive actions as American and Filipino forces executed War Plan Orange, withdrawing toward the Bataan Peninsula while declaring Manila an open city to spare it destruction. Small unit contacts gave Japanese commanders initial confidence. Their advance progressed rapidly. By January 2, 1942, they occupied Manila without significant resistance. Then the fighting intensified along Bataan's defensive lines. American forces had established strong positions across the peninsula's narrow geography, the main line of resistance stretching from Mauban to Mabatang, anchored by units including formations equipped with the new M1 rifles. Japanese probing attacks discovered something unexpected. When their infantry advanced across open ground or through jungle clearings, they didn't encounter the measured rhythm of bolt-action fire they anticipated. Instead, positions erupted with sustained firepower that suggested machine gun emplacements far more numerous than intelligence had reported. A captured Japanese soldier, interrogated by American forces, asked a question that would be repeated many times in coming months. How can America afford to equip every soldier with a machine gun? They weren't machine guns. They were M1 Garands, operated by soldiers who could fire 8 rounds before reloading, pulling the trigger as rapidly as accuracy allowed, the gas-operated mechanism chambering each new round without any manual intervention. The psychological impact on attacking forces proved as significant as the physical casualties. Japanese infantry had been trained to count enemy fire, to estimate lulls when defenders would be working their rifle bolts, creating windows for aggressive advances. Those calculations became meaningless when American positions maintained near-continuous fire. The weapon performed beyond even optimistic expectations in tropical combat conditions. Bataan's environment tested every weapon system. Heat, humidity, volcanic dust, jungle moisture that penetrated every seal and gap. M1903 Springfields required constant maintenance in such conditions, their bolt actions collecting grime that could cause jams. The M1 Garand, despite being mechanically more complex, proved remarkably resilient. General MacArthur's report to the Ordnance Department cataloged this unexpected reliability with evident satisfaction. Under combat conditions it operated with no mechanical defects, and when used in foxholes did not develop stoppages from dust or dirt. It has been in almost constant action for as much as a week without cleaning or lubrication. Soldiers discovered practical advantages beyond raw firepower. The N-block clip system, initially controversial, proved faster in combat than loading stripper clips into internal magazines. When the 8th round fired, the empty clip ejected automatically, a metallic ping that became iconic. Post-war mythology suggested Japanese soldiers learned to recognize this sound as indication an American rifleman was reloading, but combat veterans disputed such claims. In actual firefights, with mortars exploding, grenades detonating, multiple weapons firing simultaneously, and soldiers shouting, hearing a specific metallic ping from 100 yards away was impossible. The myth persisted anyway, testimony to the rifle's growing legend. Physical characteristics that seemed like drawbacks in peacetime proved beneficial in combat. The rifle's 9.5-pound weight, criticized as excessive, actually helped manage recoil from the powerful .30-06 cartridge, allowing more accurate rapid fire. The thick wooden fur end that concealed the gas system, less elegant than traditional military rifles, proved durable against the rough handling of jungle warfare. Soldiers learned to trust the weapon's fundamental solidity. January 16, 1942, brought one of the war's most unusual engagements. 1st Platoon, Troop E, 26th Cavalry Regiment, Philippine Scouts, executed what would become recognized as the U.S. Army's last mounted cavalry charge. They thundered toward Japanese positions at Morong using Colt .45 pistols, then dismounted and drew M1 Garands from saddle scabbards to continue the fight. 1 horseman died. 6 suffered severe wounds. But the attack succeeded, disrupting Japanese advance elements and buying time for defensive repositioning. An 18-year-old scout who survived that day would later remember preferring the M1 to any other weapon he'd used, despite its weight and bulk. 10 days later came Lieutenant Colonel Fry's battalion action on January 10, the engagement that produced his report about firepower being beyond descriptive powers. His 3rd Battalion, 57th Regiment, had taken positions across terrain Japanese formations needed to cross. Standard Japanese infantry tactics called for aggressive frontal assault supported by machine gun fire to suppress defenders. They advanced with confidence born from successful campaigns in China, where similar tactics had overwhelmed Chinese forces armed with various bolt-action rifles. The Philippine scouts' M1 Garands opened fire at effective range. 40 rounds per minute from each rifleman created a wall of .30-06 rounds that staggered the formation. Japanese soldiers, expecting to hear deliberate bolt-action shooting with predictable gaps, instead faced unrelenting semi-automatic fire. No gaps emerged. No lulls occurred when attackers could dash forward during enemy reloading. The advance broke. Survivors withdrew, carrying wounded, leaving dead in the open ground. Fry's report reached headquarters with language unusual for military communications, not just describing tactical success, but expressing something approaching awe at the weapon system's effectiveness. One practical problem that had seemed insurmountable before combat actually resolved itself through battlefield improvisation. Much available .30-06 ammunition came either in machine gun belts or 5-round stripper clips designed for M1903 Springfields, neither compatible with the M1's 8-round N-block clips. Soldiers adapted. They loaded individual rounds when necessary. They collected and redistributed the correct ammunition types. Supply officers prioritized N-block clips in resupply efforts. The weapon's advantages far outweighed the logistical inconvenience. By late January 1942, Japanese tactical assessments had been forced to account for this unexpected American capability. Intelligence reports noted the semi-automatic rifles. Commanders adjusted attack planning, seeking ways to neutralize the firepower advantage through artillery bombardment, nighttime infiltration, and attacks from multiple directions simultaneously. But fundamental mathematics remained. American soldiers with M1 Garands could put more rounds downrange more accurately, more quickly than Japanese soldiers with bolt-action Arisakas. In infantry combat, that equation mattered enormously. The Philippines campaign would ultimately end in American defeat, not because of rifle inferiority, but because of overwhelming Japanese numerical superiority, complete Japanese air dominance, naval blockade preventing resupply, starvation reducing defenders to half rations, and disease ravaging formations faster than combat did. But even in defeat, the M1 Garand had demonstrated something that would shape every subsequent Pacific campaign. As the Bataan defense deteriorated through February and March 1942, reports about the M1 Garand's combat performance filtered back to the United States through radio communications and submarine-delivered dispatches. On February 23, 1942, the Washington Post published a story titled, "Bataan Proves Garand Worth." The same day, the New York Times ran Garand rifle praised by General MacArthur. Time magazine followed with "The Garand in Action," describing how the weapon validated MacArthur's decade-old decision to retain the .30-06 cartridge. Major General Charles Wesson, Chief of Ordnance, recognized the propaganda value. On February 24, he sent a telegram to Winchester Repeating Arms Workers, the only private sector manufacturer trusted with M1 production. Here's a message from General MacArthur praising the superiority of the Garand rifle in combat. The general says that in the hands of our brave soldiers, the Garand operated with deadly precision even in the dust and dirt of foxhole fighting, and in many cases was in constant action for a week without cleaning or lubrication. This tribute from General MacArthur should be an inspiration for you men and women of Winchester who are now producing this remarkable weapon. Similar messages reached Springfield Armory workers. Earl McFarland, commanding officer at Springfield, addressed the workforce. In the heat of a losing battle in Bataan, General Douglas MacArthur took time to cable the War Department in Washington that our M1 rifles were performing with excellence and distinction. Captured Japanese soldiers inquired how America was able to arm every soldier with a machine gun. These weren't machine guns. They were M1 rifles. The Japanese military faced a recognition moment. Their soldiers had encountered American semi-automatic rifles, and the experience had been devastating. Combat reports documented unusually high casualties in attacks against M1-equipped positions. Japanese doctrine, built around aggressive infantry tactics and close combat where martial training would prove decisive, suddenly confronted opponents who could maintain sustained fire without the vulnerable reloading periods bolt-action weapons required. Tokyo's response revealed the depth of the problem. Japanese arsenals had experimented with semi-automatic designs in the 1930s, testing the Type Hei, Type Ko, and Type Otsu rifles. None achieved acceptable reliability or quality. When war began, Japan possessed no semi-automatic weapon in production or even in late development. Their soldiers carried excellent bolt-action rifles. The Arisaka series had exceptionally strong receivers, better than the M1903 Springfield in destructive stress testing, but they remained bolt-actions nonetheless, requiring manual operation between every shot. Imperial Japanese Navy, recognizing the severity of the disadvantage, ordered development efforts accelerated. Captured M1 Garands from the Philippines campaign provided templates. Engineers at Yokosuka Naval Arsenal began reverse engineering the gas port system, studying Garand's mechanism in detail. Initial experiments tried rechambered ring-captured M1s to fire Japan's 7.7 by 58 mm Arisaka ammunition, dimensionally similar to the .30-06 Springfield. The cartridge fit. The rifle could fire and cycle. But the 8-round N-block clip system proved incompatible with the Japanese round's slightly different dimensions, causing feeding failures that made the converted weapons unreliable. Designers took a different approach. They would copy the M1's core mechanism but modify the feeding system. Instead of the N-block clip, they developed a fixed internal magazine holding 10 rounds, charged by two 5-round stripper clips identical to those used with standard Arisaka rifles. This maintained compatibility with existing ammunition distribution while incorporating the semi-automatic capability. They added Japanese-style tangent sights and other familiar features. The result was designated the Type 4 rifle, sometimes incorrectly called the Type 5 in post-war American intelligence reports. Development work began in earnest in 1944, but Japan's industrial situation had deteriorated catastrophically by then. Allied bombing campaigns targeted manufacturing centers. Raw material shortages affected every production facility. Skilled workers had been drafted or died in combat. The Type 4 program suffered numerous setbacks, feeding system problems, jamming issues, quality control failures. Testing revealed that the rifle needed significant additional development before achieving battlefield readiness. Engineers struggled to replicate Garand's gas system tolerances with degraded manufacturing capabilities. Each prototype revealed new problems. By late 1944, the Type 4 remained in prototype status. Approximately 250 rifles were produced, with many never fully assembled. The Imperial Japanese Navy intended to issue them to Rikusentai Marine paratrooper units for homeland defense operations, but that plan assumed time that no longer existed. American forces were already capturing islands within striking distance of Japan itself. The war's momentum had shifted irreversibly. Even if Japan had successfully mass-produced the Type 4, the weapon's arrival wouldn't have altered strategic outcomes. American industrial superiority, naval dominance, and air supremacy had already determined the Pacific War's conclusion. The contrast between American and Japanese military-industrial approaches crystallized in this development program. The United States had spent 15 years developing the M1 Garand during peacetime, accepting slow progress, allowing John Garand to refine every aspect through countless iterations. When war began, American factories produced 5.4 million M1 rifles, equipping every branch of service. By 1944, the U.S. Army and Marine Corps operated with standardized semi-automatic rifle capability across all infantry formations. Japan attempted to replicate this achievement in 2 years, during wartime, with collapsing industrial infrastructure and overwhelming resource constraints. The effort never progressed beyond experimental status. Meanwhile, American M1 Garands continued demonstrating their value across every Pacific theater. At Guadalcanal in August 1942, Marines armed with M1s found the weapon especially effective in jungle warfare. The .30-06 cartridge's power allowed bullets to penetrate thick undergrowth that stopped lighter rounds. When Japanese and American forces met in column formation on narrow jungle trails, surprisingly common in dense vegetation, the M1's penetration meant a single well-aimed shot could incapacitate 2 or even 3 enemy soldiers in line. This characteristic proved particularly valuable in close-quarters jungle engagements. As Japanese tactics evolved from aggressive bayonet charges to the dig-in and hold-to-the-last-man defensive philosophy seen at Tarawa, Saipan, and Iwo Jima, the M1 excelled in different roles. Counter-sniper operations benefited from the rifle's accuracy and rapid follow-up shot capability. Suppressing fire against bunker complexes and cave positions became more effective when individual riflemen could maintain near-continuous fire. The distinctive 8-round capacity meant squad fire discipline calculations worked differently, a benefit when coordinating assault team movements against fortified positions. Marine Corps experience mirrored Army findings. Initially skeptical of the M1, preferring the proven M1903 Springfield, Marines gradually recognized the Garand's advantages. By mid-1943, Marine Corps units had completed their transition. They also discovered that M1 Garands outperformed M1 carbines in Pacific conditions, leading to many carbines being replaced with Garands in frontline units. The full-power .30-06 ammunition proved necessary for penetrating jungle vegetation and delivering decisive terminal ballistics. European theater combat validated the weapon in entirely different conditions. Operation Torch in North Africa, November 1942, marked the M1's first significant action against German forces. The rifle handled desert sand, extreme heat, and dust storms effectively, environments radically different from Philippine jungles. Sicily and Italy introduced cold, wet, mountainous terrain where the M1 continued performing reliably despite rain, snow, and mud. By D-Day, June 6, 1944, American infantry landing on Normandy beaches carried M1 Garands as standard equipment. Throughout the European campaign's final year, the weapon proved superior to German Karabiner 98K bolt-action rifles in the same calculation that had favored it in the Pacific. American soldiers could deliver more firepower per man than their opponents. General George S. Patton, never prone to excessive praise, delivered his famous assessment to the Ordnance Department on January 26, 1945. In my opinion, the M1 rifle is the greatest battle implement ever devised. That statement came from a commander who had observed virtually every infantry weapon system in the American and German arsenals under actual combat conditions. The revelation wasn't just that America possessed a superior rifle. It was that America had recognized the need for such a weapon 15 years before war began, had invested the time and resources to develop it properly despite congressional budget constraints and institutional resistance, and had built the industrial capacity to mass-produce it before the shooting started. Japan's attempted crash program to copy the M1 in 1944 to 1945 highlighted what American military planning had accomplished in the 1920s and 1930s when the outcome still mattered. The full strategic impact of the M1 Garand's firepower advantage crystallized during the island-hopping campaigns of 1943 to 1945, when American forces executed amphibious assaults against prepared Japanese defensive positions. These operations represented the most lethal combat environment of the Pacific War. Attackers advancing across open beaches against entrenched defenders who had months to construct fortifications, zero in artillery, and position machine guns with interlocking fields of fire. Tarawa Atoll, November 1943. The 2nd Marine Division hit beaches defended by 4,500 Japanese naval infantry occupying bunkers made from coconut logs, coral, and steel. The three-day battle became infamous for its casualty rate, over 1,000 Marines killed, 2,000 wounded. But the assault succeeded where many predicted failure, partly because Marines with M1 Garands could maintain suppressing fire against defensive positions while advancing across exposed terrain. Each 8-man rifle squad delivered cumulative firepower previously requiring larger formations. When Marines reached bunker complexes, the rapid-fire capability allowed covering fire for grenade assaults and flamethrower teams without the vulnerable pauses bolt-action rifles would have created. Japanese commanders recognized they faced tactical mathematics that rendered traditional defensive calculations obsolete. A single American rifle squad with M1 Garands put more rounds downrange than a comparable Japanese squad with Arisaka bolt actions, even when the Japanese squad included light machine guns. This disparity forced doctrinal adaptations. Japanese forces increasingly relied on fortifications that could withstand sustained small arms fire, knowing they couldn't match American infantry firepower in open engagements. The Philippine Sea Naval Battle, June 1944, demonstrated how thoroughly American industrial capacity had eclipsed Japan's military production. While this was primarily a carrier aviation engagement, the famous Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, it occurred while American invasion forces landed on Saipan, equipped with M1 Garands facing Japanese defenders armed with bolt-action rifles and a few light machine guns. The broader pattern was consistent. American forces brought technological and firepower advantages to virtually every engagement. The M1 Garand exemplified this approach, not revolutionary genius but methodical engineering excellence deployed at scale. MacArthur's return to the Philippines, October 20, 1944, brought M1-equipped forces back to the islands where the rifle had first proven itself in combat. The 6th Army that landed at Leyte carried Garands as standard issue. Veterans of those landings noted the contrast with stories from 1941 to 1942. Where earlier defenders had fought with mixed arsenals including old M1903 Springfields and limited Garand numbers, the returning American forces enjoyed complete semi-automatic rifle capability across all infantry formations. The Japanese defenders, still armed with bolt-action Arisakas, faced the same firepower disadvantage that had bloodied their formations on Bataan 3 years earlier. Iwo Jima, February-March 1945, tested the M1 Garand under the most extreme conditions the Pacific Theater offered. Japanese defenders had constructed an elaborate tunnel network connecting hundreds of fortified positions. Fighting occurred at point-blank range in volcanic terrain that offered minimal cover. Marines advancing across black sand beaches faced machine gun and artillery fire from concealed positions. The M1's rapid-fire capability proved critical during the first hours when Marines established beachheads under devastating fire. Riflemen could suppress enemy positions long enough for follow-on forces to move forward, then advance themselves while others provided covering fire. The 8-round capacity meant fewer reloading pauses during the most dangerous moments when Marines crossed open ground. One Iwo Jima veteran later described the weapon's psychological impact. When you're advancing and you know you have 8 rounds that you can fire as fast as you pull the trigger, it changes how you move. You're not thinking about working a bolt. You're thinking about the target. Your rifle becomes an extension of your will. This mental element, the confidence that came from knowing you could deliver sustained fire without mechanical interruption, proved as valuable as the raw firepower itself. Okinawa, April-June 1945, brought the M1's final major engagement of World War II. The 3-month campaign involved the largest amphibious assault of the Pacific War, with 180,000 American troops landing against 100,000 Japanese defenders. Combat devolved into brutal close-quarters fighting as Japanese forces retreated into defensive positions in southern Okinawa's ridges and hills. The M1 excelled in these conditions. Cave-clearing operations benefited from rapid fire when assault teams encountered enemy soldiers in confined spaces. Counter-sniper operations utilized the rifle's accuracy and follow-up shot capability. Suppressing fire against machine gun nests became more effective with semi-automatic capability. Casualties on Okinawa exceeded all previous Pacific campaigns. Over 12,000 Americans killed, 38,000 wounded. Japanese losses approached 100,000. But the assault succeeded, bringing American forces within striking distance of the Japanese home islands. Throughout the campaign, American infantry maintained firepower advantages that Japanese commanders couldn't counter with available weapons. The Type 4 semi-automatic rifles that Imperial Japanese Navy had hoped to deploy remained in prototype status, unavailable to the defenders who needed them most. Captured Japanese documents from late war period revealed the depth of concern about American infantry firepower. Tactical manuals emphasized avoiding direct infantry engagements when possible, instead relying on fortifications, artillery, and nighttime attacks when American firepower advantages were partially negated by visibility limitations. These doctrinal adjustments acknowledged reality. Japanese infantry armed with bolt-action rifles could not match American infantry armed with M1 Garands in sustained firefights. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, August 6 and 9, 1945, eliminated any possibility of the ground invasion that would have seen M1 Garands used in combat on the Japanese home islands. Operation Downfall planning documents had projected horrific casualties for such an invasion, but they also assumed complete American infantry firepower superiority. Every American assault soldier would carry an M1 Garand. Japanese defenders would include home guard formations armed with whatever weapons remained. Many would have carried bolt-action rifles, some would have had only bamboo spears. August 15, 1945. Emperor Hirohito's surrender broadcast ended the Pacific War. Across occupied territories, Japanese forces began surrendering their weapons. American forces collected millions of Arisaka rifles, Type 92 and Type 96 machine guns, Type 14 pistols, and other equipment. Among the surrendered weapons, approximately 250 Type 4 semi-automatic rifles, the sum total of Japan's wartime effort to match American M1 Garand capability. The arithmetic was stark. United States, 5.4 million M1 Garands produced during the war, equipping every Army and Marine Corps infantry formation by 1944. Japan, 250 experimental rifles, none issued to combat units, development never progressing beyond prototype status despite 3 years of effort. This disparity wasn't merely about rifle design. It reflected fundamentally different approaches to military-industrial mobilization. America had invested 15 years developing the M1 during peacetime when such development was possible. Japan attempted to replicate that achievement during wartime when industrial capacity was already fully committed to existing production and under attack from Allied bombing. The outcome demonstrated why military preparation during peacetime matters. By the time shooting starts, the window for fundamental innovations has closed. The M1 Garand hadn't won the Pacific War alone. Naval supremacy, air dominance, industrial capacity, resource advantages, and strategic decisions all contributed to American victory. But the rifle had provided American infantry with quantifiable combat advantages in every engagement from Bataan to Okinawa. The war ended, but the M1 Garand service continued. American occupation forces in Japan carried Garands when they landed in August 1945. The rifle became a symbol of American military power during the occupation years, visible in photographs of GIs patrolling Tokyo streets and manning checkpoints throughout the defeated empire. Japanese civilians who had been told their soldiers possessed superior martial spirit now saw American soldiers equipped with weapons that embodied a different philosophy: technological advantage through methodical engineering excellence. Interestingly, American occupation authorities worked to rebuild Japanese industry under democratic capitalism. W. Edwards Deming, whose papers document the period, advised Japanese manufacturers on quality control and production efficiency, the same principles that had enabled American mass production of weapons like the M1 Garand. Japanese industry would eventually excel at these methods, becoming global manufacturing leaders in peacetime consumer goods. But during the war, that industrial capacity had been directed toward military production that couldn't match American output in quality or quantity. The Korean War, June 1950, brought the M1 back to combat. North Korean and Chinese forces, armed largely with Soviet-supplied Mosin-Nagant bolt-action rifles and PPSH-41 submachine guns, discovered the same disadvantage Japanese forces had faced. American infantry with M1 Garands maintained firepower superiority in most engagements. Despite being 15 years old by then, the rifle remained the backbone of American infantry capability. New production contracts were awarded to International Harvester and Harrington and Richardson, producing an additional 500,000 minutes and 1 second during 1953 to 1956. The rifle's influence extended beyond American forces. Through military aid programs, M1 Garands equipped Allied armies across Europe and Asia. South Korea, West Germany, Italy, Japan, ironically becoming a major recipient, Denmark, Greece, Turkey, Iran, South Vietnam, and the Philippines all received Garands as part of American military assistance. The rifle that had helped defeat the Axis powers became a Cold War tool for arming American allies against communist expansion. Domestically, the M1 achieved iconic status. General Patton's famous quote, "The greatest battle implement ever devised," became legendary. Veterans returning home brought memories of the rifle's reliability and effectiveness. In 1952, Italy's Beretta Company began producing Garands using Winchester tooling shipped by the U.S. government, creating the Model 1952, and eventually developing it into the BM-59 series with selective fire capability and 20-round magazines. The basic Garand design proved adaptable for post-war requirements. The U.S. military officially replaced the M1 with the M14 rifle on March 26, 1958. The M14 was essentially an improved Garand, selective fire capable, using 7.62 by 51 mm NATO ammunition, fed from detachable 20-round box magazines. John Garand himself participated in the M14's design team, bringing his expertise to bear on evolving his original concept. The transition from M1 to M14 represented evolution rather than revolution, acknowledging how thoroughly Garand's original design had met military requirements. Even after official replacement, M1 Garands remained in service for years. U.S. Navy security forces used them into the 1970s. The rifles equipped drill teams, ceremonial units, and reserve formations. Veterans kept personal examples as mementos. The distinctive weight, the satisfying mechanical action, the metallic ping of an ejecting clip. These became part of American military culture. The civilian marksmanship program, established by Congress, eventually sold surplus M1 Garands to American citizens for sport shooting and collecting. Hundreds of thousands of rifles entered civilian ownership, where they remained popular for target shooting and hunting. The .30-06 cartridge's power made Garands effective for large game hunting. Their accuracy and reliability ensured continued use long after military service ended. John Garand retired from Springfield Armory on February 1, 1953, after 34 years of government service. He never received royalties for his most famous design, though Congress awarded him a $100,000 payment in recognition of his contributions. He died on February 16, 1974, at age 86, having lived to see his rifle become one of history's most successful military firearms. Over 6 million M1 Garands were produced between 1936 and 1957. The rifle served American forces in World War II, Korea, and early Vietnam. It equipped over 50 Allied nations. It influenced countless subsequent designs. The Japanese Type 4 rifles, those 250 prototypes that represented Japan's wartime attempt to match American capability, became curiosities. Some were captured by American forces and sent back for technical evaluation. Others disappeared during the chaotic surrender and occupation period. Collectors prize surviving examples today not for their combat record, they had none, but as evidence of what Japan tried to achieve too late in the war to matter. The story's final irony emerged in post-war years. Japan, rebuilt with American assistance, eventually became a manufacturing superpower. Japanese companies mastered quality control and production efficiency. But during World War II, when it mattered most, Japan couldn't replicate what John Garand and American industry had accomplished, developing and mass-producing a semi-automatic rifle that fundamentally altered infantry combat. December 8, 1941, Japanese commanders advanced on the Philippines expecting their Malayan and Dutch East Indies campaigns pattern to repeat. Aggressive infantry tactics overwhelming defenders armed with bolt-action rifles, victory achieved through superior martial spirit and tactical aggression. They had defeated Chinese forces for years using these methods. Nothing in their experience prepared them for sustained semi-automatic rifle fire. The M1 Garand didn't win World War II alone. No single weapon determines war's outcome when conflicts involve millions of soldiers, thousands of ships and aircraft, continent-spanning logistics, and industrial economies mobilized for total warfare. But the rifle provided American infantry with tangible advantages in every ground engagement. 40 rounds per minute versus 15. 8-round capacity versus 5. Gas-operated reliability versus manual bolt operation. These differences mattered in jungle firefights, beach assaults and close-quarters urban combat. More significantly, the M1 represented something larger than rifle design. It demonstrated the value of peacetime military preparation, of investing years developing weapons before war begins, of building industrial capacity to mass-produce those weapons when needed. America spent 15 years perfecting the M1 and created factories capable of producing millions before the first shot was fired. Japan attempted to replicate this achievement in 2 years during wartime with collapsing industrial infrastructure. The contrast explains more about World War II's outcome than many dramatic battles. John Garand's legacy extends beyond the rifle bearing his name. His work established principles for military firearms that influenced designs worldwide. The gas-operated semi-automatic mechanism he perfected became standard for military rifles for generations. Modern infantry weapons from the M16 to the AK-47 trace lineage through different design philosophies, but they all acknowledge a fundamental truth Garand proved. Soldiers equipped with reliable semi-automatic rifles possessed decisive advantages over those carrying bolt actions. The Japanese soldiers who asked, "How can America afford to equip every soldier with a machine gun?" had identified the core issue without realizing it. America could afford it because America had planned for it, invested in it, and built the industrial capacity to produce it. That capability, to envision military requirements years before war begins, to fund development through peacetime budget constraints, to maintain production readiness, proved as important as battlefield tactics or strategic decisions. Lieutenant Colonel Philip Fry, watching Japanese formations break under M1 Garand fire on Bataan, had called the weapon's power beyond his descriptive powers. He was describing more than just a rifle. He was witnessing the outcome of American military-industrial preparation meeting Japanese confidence in martial spirit and aggressive tactics. The Garand's 8 rounds and gas-operated mechanism represented 15 years of engineering work, millions of dollars in development costs, and a military establishment willing to adopt radical innovation despite institutional resistance. The metallic ping of an ejecting and block clip became one of World War II's most distinctive sounds. Not just a mechanical noise, but the audible signature of American military power meeting Axis expectations and shattering them. 40 rounds per minute.